I'm Russell Bates, Kiowa Native American writer from Anadarko, Oklahoma. I've worked in Hollywood, both as a writer and an actor. I've written for about 20 television series in my time, and I was in 7 movies as an actor, and just generally have been very, very lucky to find a career that I could satisfy and that could satisfy me.
Leave him alone. It was John's mistake.
How badly is he hurt?
Just his pride.
I used to write in school and never thought of it at all as something that I might want to do as a career. I was in college, was drafted, entered the Air Force, and became a missile technician stationed in the Florida Panhandle. After a terrifying accident in the missile shop, I was in the hospital for 9 months. As therapy, they asked me if I had a hobby, and I said I once tried to write science fiction stories. They got me a typewriter and a bunch of paper, and I wrote science fiction all day long. Somewhere along the line, I stopped just typing and said, I'm a writer. At the beginning of 1969, I'd only been out of the Air Force 6 months. All of a sudden, I found myself in Los Angeles, working at Kaiser Permanente Hospital on Sunset Boulevard, and going to class at nights at the Writers Guild to learn how to write for TV. I was only in the school 3 months, and a story of mine was seen by this one producer. He hired me as his trainee, and I found myself working at Universal Studios on a series called The Name of the Game. That began it all, and I worked 12 years in the industry writing for some 20 to 30 television shows. It was when I was accepted into the open door classes at the Writers Guild that I met Gene Roddenberry, Gene Kuhn, and Dorothy Fontana. When it came time, some 4 years later, for another Star Trek series, the animated one for Saturday morning children's shows.
Space, the final frontier.
Since I was Native American, they wanted a Native American Star Trek story. Well, I allied with a young filmmaker named David Wise, and the two of us wrote a teleplay called How Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth, where the Mayan god Kukulkan returns in Star Trek's time, intent on destroying all of mankind because they had disobeyed him. The Enterprise meets him in deep space, and he captures them, and it's up to them to convince him that he's wrong.
Kukulkan!
Mr. Walking Bear, how do you know who's aboard that ship?
I am a Comanche captain. I've studied the histories of many ancient Earth peoples, especially my own. That ship out there bears a strong resemblance to a god in Mayan and Aztec legends, Kukulkan.
Captain.
This story was given to Filmation Studios for the animated Star Trek. The episode was produced, and within a year, it won an Emmy Award. And it was the first major Emmy ever won by any Star Trek series, and now is the only major Emmy Award that they ever have won.
Where are your weapons of destruction? Use them on me if you dare.
We have no weapons, and if we did, we would use them only with reason.
Where is your hate?
Star Trek teaches that man will learn the error of his ways and no longer destroy the peoples that he meets. And for Native Americans, then, that's hopeful, that what they had to suffer will not be suffered by anyone else in the future. And that basically, I think, is the attraction that Star Trek held for its audience. Hope, peace, and long life.
There's a line from Shakespeare.
Yes, Bones, I remember it. How sharper than a serpent's tooth it is to have a thankless child.
Indeed, Captain.
Laying a course for Starbase 21, all ahead, warp 2.
Over the years, I got to work for a number of series, even though the material they bought wasn't always produced. But my lineup of things that I've worked for and produced material for include The Ghostly Mrs. Muir, The Sixth Sense, which was about ESP, I worked for MASH, All in the Family, The $6 Million Man, the original Battlestar Galactica, Kolchak the Night Stalker, and numerous other shows.
"O my queen," said the royal sorcerer to Hatshepsut, "with this amulet, you and your descendants are endowed by the goddess Isis."
One of the projects at Filmation Studios at the time was a Wonder Woman type character. An Egyptian amulet gave this young scientist the power to change herself into Isis, the goddess from Egyptian legend.
Almighty Isis. And Isis, dedicated foe of evil, defender of the weak, champion of truth and justice.
And she used her powers to help people. We'd had the assignments for about 4 months, had written according to the original format. When they came and told us everything had been changed, so they gave us 3 weeks to readjust all of our writings. And so consequently then I changed the characters to high school characters, but had them leave the high school and go to a town where flying saucers had been seen and people were disappearing.
Cindy.
They were so pleased with the script, they made it the pilot episode, and so I wrote episode number 1.
Oh, mighty Isis.
It's called The Lights of Mystery Mountain, and you get to meet Isis for the first time and find out what her powers are and how she's able to stop and help young people who are involved in crime and didn't know it.
Oh, zephyr winds which blow on high, lift me now so I can fly.
My breakthrough into publishing in books and magazines came because of the Clarion Writers Workshop. I attended these summer workshops 5 years and had the very top names in science fiction writing as teachers. The theory of the workshop was this: you're either born a writer or you weren't. There is no one in the world who can teach you to write. They only can teach you to write better than you have. I'm in some 35 different college and high school textbooks. Sometimes the same story, sometimes different, but it means that at least I'm well represented in schools from around the country, and they get to know that there are Native American writers from reading what I've written. My most famous story is Rite of Encounter, where around 1851, a young Kiowa man goes on his vision quest, secludes himself, starves himself, tortures himself, trying to seek a dream that will run the rest of his life. On one of the days he's allowed to leave his suffering spot and go to the river to bathe, he finds white men who've died of smallpox. And because he was downstream from where one of their bodies lay in the water, he contracts the disease. When he wakes up the next morning, there's this horrible creature sitting next to him in the high place in the rocks. A horrible thing with no skin, no face, a man-shaped thing, but just red, open flesh, dripping fluids. The disease has crossed with his vision, and he's seeing it as something real. For the rest of the story then, he tries to use his knowledge and his experience to rid himself of this creature, not knowing that it's inside him in his blood. And in trying to write my own stories, I take the stories that the rest of the world has written. I take the stories that have been told to me from my own people. I find the differences in between and then try to merge the two so that most of what Native American stories would contain survives in words and concepts that people of other cultures would come to understand, even though they have no knowledge of these things beforehand. It's really a difficult thing to try to do, and it makes my stories, after a manner of speaking, unique. I occupy that one particular position where I have new things to tell, new ways to tell them. I'm hoping that from my stories I show that Native Americans exist alongside the rest of the peoples of the world, taking part in this world as it exists, and will continue to do so for quite a long time to come. What I'll leave behind is a legacy of stories that still will continue to teach even after I have departed this earth. Because there's one thing that I can say: time and life may still a writer's hand, but not his voice.